On today's Battlefield Recon, we've played it, we've finished it, we bring you our verdict on Battlefield 4 on all three major next-gen formats, PC, PS4 and Xbox One. We bring you amazing new footage fresh from the PS4 version of Battlefield 4. And finally, we give you the winner of our sensational Battlefield 4 book competition. All this and more on today's Battlefield Recon. Before we start, I'd just like to point your attention to the huge volume of great new Battlefield 4 videos we've got on the channel this week, taken live from our playthrough at DICE, captured on a PlayStation 4, probably running in 720p and looking absolutely mint. We'll have unseen levels, maps, game modes, weapons, things you haven't seen before. Please stay tuned, so please like this video and subscribe to make sure you don't miss out. I'm Dan Dawkins for Battlefield Recon. I'm joined by Andy Hartup.
Hello.
Okay, and we're here today to talk about the fact we finished and played Battlefield 4. We've played it on all three major next-gen formats. Andy has spent the best part of a week with DICE in Sweden. And Andy, tell us about what you've been doing, what you've been playing.
Okay. Well, to start with, as Dan said, I played all three next-gen formats, and I played a little bit of current-gen as well. What I did is I finished the single-player game in its entirety. And then I sampled all the maps and all the modes from multiplayer across both PS4 and PC.
Okay, so before we get really started, give me your one sentence review of Battlefield for people who were too lazy to watch on.
Whoa.
Now you want to watch on. Okay, so I'm interested, Andy, and you've seen all three different next-gen versions. I guess you're expecting them to be similar, but it appears there are differences between the versions. Can you outline briefly what are the key differences?
There are differences between the versions. PC on ultra settings, running on an amazing PC looks better than the PS4 version. Mm-hmm. And I did play some of the same levels on PS4 and Xbox One. There were differences. I do have to say, the Xbox One version doesn't look quite as good.
Right. And I guess this is down to what we believe is a resolution difference. But the game, essentially exactly the same, just as fun, just as equally as WoW.
Yeah.
Good.
It's,
okay.
The thing that impressed me technically before we sort of move on to the nitty-gritty of what I saw was that all the versions ran, solid 60 frames per second, never dropped. They were absolutely rock solid, and they all looked amazing. Even when there was 64 players on a map, because the next gen version supports 64 players. Even when there was that many players on the map, it was kicking off absolutely everywhere. The frame rate and the resolution, it was just rock solid.
Very impressive. Now, did you see anything of the current gen versions? And if you didn't, well, it doesn't matter. But
the current gen versions look okay, but you lose out on a lot of visual fidelity and a little bit of the destruction in current gen.
Of course, but as you would
and
expect.
Scale as well.
Yeah, as you would expect of less powerful machines.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what I'm interested in, for the longest time, Battlefield has been respected as a great tactical multiplayer shooter, but the single player or story mode has lagged behind. Have they nailed it this time?
They have and they haven't. So we'll get on to talking about multiplayer in a bit, because that is still the main reason to buy Battlefield.
Yeah.
But anyone looking to go into the single player, I would say that the plot is absolute nonsense. The characterization's pretty good.
I've liked the trailers and the characters. Yeah. They've looked strong. Yeah.
But there's one bit where you're sort of, I don't want to give too much away. You're sort of stranded in one area, and then it just simply cuts to the next level and says 2 days later, without any explanation as to how you got there. You're suddenly in a jeep in a completely different country. So I don't get that. Maybe you're supposed to be in the same country. So the characterization is good. The storytelling is incredibly poor. But as a series of, I think it's 7 levels, which have their own little theme that you're fighting on, they are incredible. They are sort of visual set pieces. They're thrilling. They feel a lot like the multiplayer. So what's happening is you're getting points for kills. You're unlocking kit. It feels exactly as it should do in multiplayer. So the two are very, very well twinned.
Do you feel like playing the single player does get you to a decent state of readiness for multiplayer?
Yeah, I'd say it does. I'd say it's a good training mission for the multiplayer.
And in terms of like you've talked about, the pacing and the different locations. Do the locations that you go through in single player reflect what you're getting from the multiplayer maps, or are they different?
Yeah. I mean, some of them are fairly similar because the multiplayer maps are adapted from some of the single player environments, and you'll notice some of the same effects. So one of the maps that everyone's seen quite a lot of is Paracel Storm.
Yeah.
And when you're playing that in multiplayer, a storm slowly blows in over the course of the level, so that right at the end you're fighting in like a typhoon, and it's all dark and it's really sort of atmospheric. The same thing. Well, one of the levels in the single player quite early on is set in the middle of that typhoon as well. So you'll see themes and common differences in the single player, but they're not carbon copies. It's not like you're in the single player in the same multiplayer maps fighting bots or anything. It's a proper self-contained story.
Now, I mean, obviously we're familiar with the core Battlefield gameplay. Is there anything it does in single player that feels like a little bit outside of its comfort zone, or experimental or unique? I'm looking at stuff like the way the commander mode's being introduced on multiplayer, and anything more tactical or different?
Not really, no. I think the only thing that doesn't really translate too well to single player is when you are spotting enemies for your teammates. So when you spot in multiplayer, you on PS4 the button is R1. You spot an enemy and your teammates can see it. In multiplayer, you hold down. In single player, you hold down R1, bring up like a tactical view, and it illuminates enemies for you to see. And it doesn't work particularly well because, you still most of the time it's you has to shoot them. But that's the point. I mean, it's single player. It's you playing. You've got to kill all the enemies.
Now, in some other shooters that are available, it feels like the intensity is turned up to 11 for the duration of the entire campaign without much sort of dip in pacing or sort of, genuine context-setting stuff. Do you think, there's good pacing throughout Battlefield story? Does it slow it down to speed it up?
Does it slow it down to speed it up? It does in certain bits, yeah. I think campaign-wise, it compares incredibly favourably to other multiplayer shooters out there.
Right.
And I think now technically, because it runs at a solid 60 frames a second and looks amazing and has destruction, I think it's going to become a lot of people's shooter of choice.
And without spoiling anything, can you tip a hat to maybe your favourite moment from the single player bit?
I think that level that I mentioned with the storm is absolutely incredible. You see all the rain lashing in, the palm trees sort of bending, and you see like massive objects sort of being blown around the screen and cars and things like that. So it's a great level.
Oh, fantastic. Well, obviously the key reason a lot of people buy Battlefield is for its amazing tactical multiplayer. You've been playing multiplayer on PC and on PS4. How is it? What has changed? We've talked a lot about it on the show over the last couple of weeks. What's the key thing to get across?
I think that the main thing is that the levolution and the destruction genuinely makes a big difference. Now in BF3, the destruction wasn't all it could be. You could blow the fronts off buildings, you could knock holes in walls. There's nothing particularly great. In Battlefield 4, the destruction and the levolution moments, every map's got a levolution moment, and pretty much every map can be absolutely trashed. Now, one of the main complaints are from the Siege of Shanghai map in the beta is that there wasn't an awful lot of destruction. Let me tell you, that map is one with the least destruction on, I'd say. Because the rest of them, one thing people love doing in Battlefield Bad Company 2, for example, is like driving a tank through a house and watching it collapse. I did that in Battlefield 4 on the Goldman Railway map.
Yeah.
So it was, and it works in other maps as well. So that element of it is fantastic, and every map has a levolution moment. And in the Siege of Shanghai, it does change the shape of the map. You are forced to sort of fight on the ground. In other maps, it makes much bigger difference. Now, EA released or allowed people to release footage of Flood Zone on Friday.
Right.
That basically lets you flood an entire map, so the streets become waterways, so boats come into it. There's a lot more fighting on rooftops. It genuinely changes the way that a map plays.
What was your feeling about the new modes and how well they work?
The new modes, Obliteration works pretty well, although I found it a bit like, when you're young and you're in the playground playing football and like 22 people chase after the football. Yeah. It's like that with the guy with the bomb. Like you just see entire teams, one team chasing after him and another team trying to defend him. So, but it works pretty well. It's a nice mode, and I had some really, really tense battles. what was it called? Operation Dawnbreaker, I think it was the map that we played that most on. It's sort of like the Siege of Shanghai, but it's like a longer map. So that worked really well. Diffuse is the other mode that was introduced.
Yes.
I am not a fan of it, I have to say. It is 5 versus 5, and you get 1 life. And the aim is it's basically a lot like Counter-Strike. The aim for one team is to plant a bomb in one of 2 locations, and the aim for the opposition team is to stop it. I didn't like it at all. It feels really contrary to the way every other mode in Battlefield plays. You know, you're eschewing really aggressive, tactical, vehicular, class-based play for like a Twitch shooter. Like I found, like even at the review event, what was happening is people were going to the bomb site and going prone in the corner and just shooting anyone that came in through the door. And that's what people do in Call of Duty and in Counter-Strike. That's not what people do in Battlefield.
But as a variety introduction of a different type of flavour of gameplay, I mean, surely that works. It might not be for you, but
it's not. Well, that's why I said it. It's not for me, but I can see why they've done it. And you know, again, technically, it's very well balanced. It's just not for me.
Okay, well, the big question is: you're a huge Battlefield fan through all the series. Like, is this the time to say it's the best Battlefield yet?
Yeah.
Andy Hartup.
Yeah.
It is.
Stick that on the box.
Yeah. There it is. The best Battlefield yet by Battlefield Recon's Andy Hartup, possibly a vested interest, but no less a fan. I'm so excited about that, Andy. Now, you need to stay tuned this week because we've got on the show and on the channel a huge selection of exclusive PlayStation 4 videos with a selection of, I guess, unseen maps and perhaps some weapon stuff and perhaps some play tips. Lots of great things, so do subscribe. If you like the video, please click like. If you want to find out who's won the book, you need to follow us on Twitter, which is @BattleRecon, and we shall reveal the winner of the book. And yeah, thank you for all your contributions to that. So please stay tuned for the rest of the week, and until then, it's bye from us.